Good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes just to let everybody filter in. But whilst we're waiting, do you want to pop a hello, hiya, how you doing in the chat?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Steph.
Hi,
Oh,
Steph.
that's lovely to have you here. We should catch up soon. It's been ages.
It really has.
Hi, Ania. Lovely to have you. Hey, Jade. How's the job going? Hi, Paul. Hi, now hang on. Milena? I hope I've said that right. Hi, Catherine. Hope you're doing well. I'm so glad it's going well, Jade. We need to catch up as well. Hi, Molly.
Wonderful. You're all welcome.
Yeah, the team are welcome, Steph, as always. Hi, Alex.
We do have a lot of people registered for today's session, so we'll just give it just a moment. I'll just keep talking whilst people are filtering in. Today's session is being recorded, and the recorded will be on our website at some point this afternoon. We will be sending it out to everybody who is registered. So if you do have to dash off for any reason, the phone rings, then you'll be able to catch up. We will send the replay out. And any resources that are mentioned as well, they're always featured on the same page on the website. Okay. So anyone who's not here now, they can start to catch up. What do you reckon, Leanne? Shall I go? Yep, perfect. So welcome everyone to our April People Lunch and Learn, leading with calm clarity. But before I hand over to Leanne, here is a quick update from Beam. So we've been responsible for developing kind, credible leaders throughout organizations all over the world, in companies from legal to tech to government. And these programs are developed and based on research from over 70,000 different leaders. And our program covers 5 key principles that are present in successful leaders, regardless of industry or sector. Through our program, we develop your people through understanding others and learning techniques to deal with situations managers deal with that most are never trained for. The most valuable resource in any company is your people. So understanding how to lead the right way is the key to success. You can find out more about our leadership program. You can drop us a message or you can book a discovery call. I will put the link to do that in the chat. We are also starting a mixed cohort later this year on our workshop Leading with Strength. So I'll put the wait list for that because we haven't got all the details ready. But if you're interested and would like to sign up for that, I will put the link so you can do so in the chat as well. So I'm going to hand over to Leanne now to get started with today's session, and I'll be back at the end of the session.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. And yes, we would absolutely love to come and work with your organisation or have you on one of our mixed cohorts later in the year. So if you just want to find out more about that, just drop us a message and we can keep you updated as we progress with the content. So today is clearly a really popular topic. We've had around, I think Tom was telling me, around 130 people sign up for today. And as you regulars will know, that generally means about a third to a half show up. And the rest, amazingly, a large percentage actually do watch the replays as well. So this is clearly a topic that people want some help and support with. What we're going to cover today, I will go through in a minute, but as I know there are some new names on here, I will introduce myself. I am Leanne Weaver. I am the MD of Beam Training and work alongside my husband, Tom. And Beam deliver leadership, well-being and personal development training courses all around the world. We operate in over 45 countries. And as Tom said, we work with all kinds of industries as well. So whether you are in local government, whether you are in tech, finance, we will have experience of working within those organizations. And I guess the really important thing for those of you on today's session is that every single workshop we ever deliver is really focused on giving the attendees practical tools to take away and start using immediately. And we set up People, it's well over 18 months ago now, to do that, to offer free training courses once a month to support those people who are always supporting everyone else. And as many of you will know, there's lots of names here who have been with us from the beginning. That has kind of grown. So we now have expert sessions. And if you're in South Wales, we even have in-person sessions as well. Apart from the in-person sessions, is always free, and we're really passionate about that. And I guess if you want to support us, then the way you can support us is tell people about us, invite other people, put a post on LinkedIn, because that really helps us get the right people in the room. So today is all about leading with calm clarity. So we're going to cover quite a few major topics in a very short space of time. The first topic we're going to cover, many of you may already know, is probably one of my favorite topics. I love anything neuroscience. It's certainly where my passion is. So we're going to delve into a little bit of neuroscience of just understanding what happens when we start to lead under stress. What happens in my brain when pressure rises? How do I cope with looking after myself and looking after other people? We'll then look at what clouds our clarity. So why sometimes do we not behave in a way that we normally would? Why we find difficulty in being able to see the wood for the trees. Then the really important part of any of these lunch and learns, I'm going to share with you tools. So I'm going to share with you some practical tools you can start using this afternoon. None of them are rocket science. It's really straightforward stuff, but it's practical stuff. So I'm going to share with you some tools to help you create calm clarity in your own mind. And of course, as a people-centric person, you can also have in your mind how you could teach it to someone else. And then we will create an action plan that helps you step into calm and clear leadership. So you're not being ruled by stress, you're not being reactive, you are staying calm and focused no matter what's going on around you. So a little bit of interaction to begin with. If you can go to the chat box, I want you to think about how you behave when pressure starts to rise. How do you react? Hi, Zoya. So when something urgent lands on your desk, when something unexpected happens, when emotions are high, when you're perhaps feeling the pressure from above and below, what actually happens inside of you? How do you react? So in the chat box, let us know if you're someone who starts overthinking, you get stuck in your head. That's a number one. Are you someone who reacts really quickly? Do you go into hyper-reactive mode? That would be two. Three, are you someone who just avoids and procrastinates? Almost like that rabbit in the headlights thing. You just start freezing. Are you someone who people pleases? That's number four. You just try and keep everyone else happy and often neglect yourself in the process. Do you start to become really overwhelmed and then shut down? It's almost like, oh, I just can't process anything at all. So have a little look. Let's see what we've got. So we've got overthinkers. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I get that. Really good point, Beth. A mixture of all depending on the situation. That's a very good point, and I'll explain that in a moment. Calm but withdrawn. So Molly's perhaps the amazing swan that seems all calm and in control, but actually inside is feeling it. Procrastinate, 2 and 4, procrastinate or people pleasing. Yep. Oh, I love your countdown, Steph. An overthinker. Or, yeah, maybe in a process. Yep, that would make sense to me, Nia. Depends on who it is. Depends on who we're dealing with, right? Usually option 3, sometimes overthinking. Yep. There's loads of overthinkers in this room. Yeah, can completely shut down and procrastinate. I can too, Sheila. I resonate with that. 2 or 5, depending on the workload. Okay, so we're going to explore this a little bit more as we go through the session. Let's first think about the reality of being in a people-centric role. We set up people with the intention of supporting those people who support everyone else. So my assumption here is that everyone in this room is what we would term to be a people person. And when we are a people person in our work and actually in our personal life as well, you actually place yourself in a really unique position. So, one of the things that happens is we start to carry the emotional labor of other people. So we hold other people's emotions. We perhaps try and put on a brave face for someone. Perhaps we try and act like we're feeling calm because we don't want to push our stress on, but actually inside we're feeling really stressed. Emotional labor is something we work with a lot at Beam. We actually run emotional labor sessions for organizations to support those in people-centric roles. It's a really unique positioning. And a lot of us don't really appreciate how draining it can be if we are in that role where we're carrying lots of other people's stuff. And if we don't have a healthy way of coping with that, if we don't have a healthy outlet for that, then ultimately what we can see is it leads to burnout. So the fact is, you are holding other people's emotions, and that isn't always easy to do. You may also find that within your role, you don't have the support or the safe places you'd need. Maybe you're in a HR department that's just 1 or 2 people. Maybe you don't have somewhere where you can safely go and share that confidential information. So you can offload, you can get support, you can get guidance. You may also be seen as the person who holds it all together. You're expected to be calm, fair, clear, stable, even when other people aren't, even when other people are absolutely freaking out. If you're seen as the people person, people somehow expect that as people, we should just know what to do and stay calm. I've shared before, but it really was an eye opener for Tom and I when the pandemic hit. And certainly it was before lockdown, and just as we were getting this news and companies were starting to deal with what does this mean? And we had almost every company we work with reach out to us and say, what's your pandemic policy? How do you cope with a pandemic? And we realized very quickly that given the unique role that we were in, that a lot of organizations we worked with somehow thought we would know how to deal with a pandemic. So you're seen as the person who'll have the answers, who'll know what to do. And whilst, that's kind of humbling and a privilege at times, that's also incredibly burdensome at times. So we can often be the go-to person, the person that everyone turns to when stuff's challenging, which can mean we often have to put on a face. In our leadership program, we often talk about when we're carrying a lot of emotional labor is whether we're surface acting or we're deep acting. When we're surface acting, we are putting on a face amongst those around us. We're pretending things are fine. We're pretending that we know that it'll all work out in the end. We're pretending that we empathize with their challenge. We know from research that when we're surface acting, when we're putting on a face, it's draining. Reflect back to any time, it might be in this work, it might be in previous employment, where you have had to put on a face, particularly if you're in the service industry. And inside, you're dealing with challenges, and then outside, you have to put on the smile and be really caring about the other people. What you'll know is at the end of that day, you're exhausted. You might also be managing multiple personalities and needs, not necessarily your own, but certainly the people that you're supporting. And that can be challenging. You might be dealing with people who are incredibly different in the way they respond to a challenge and how they deal with their emotions. And as someone who's leading that, it can be really difficult. Ultimately, all of this creates a lot of stress when we're already experiencing stress. So within a leadership role, a people-centric role, you're not just managing the work you do. In fact, many of you would probably tell me that that's the easy bit. You're managing the energy, the emotions, the expectations of other people all at the same time as doing the work that you do. And no one really teaches us how to do that. No one really tells us how to look after our own well-being when we're dealing with that level of stress. So what I want to share with you is a really brief summary to begin with of understanding what's going on in our brain whenever we experience a stressful situation. Now, this is a huge topic in itself, and I do know in our replays, so if you go to our library on the website, there is a full lunch and learn about stress. So I will be zipping through this, but you can absolutely go and watch the stress workshop that we have. But in terms of us dealing with a stressor, what happens within the brain is really powerful. It's really impactful because our brain sits there in the dark. So our brain actually has no idea what that stressful thing is that we're experiencing. It just reads how stressful it is by the way in which our body is responding, by the way in which we're reacting to that threat. And what our brain assumes is that every time we experience a high level of stress, we are in a life or death situation. So that might be really accurate if you're running for your life one day, hopefully not. But it probably isn't accurate if you're sat in front of your laptop getting stressed because you've got multiple emails, demands, deadlines. But your brain will respond in the same way. And the first thing that we need to be aware of is when my brain believes that I'm under threat, believes that there's a stress, it triggers what's known as the threat response. And the threat response essentially tells the brain that we need to pay attention to this thing that is making us scared. So it makes us react very quickly, which is great if I've got to jump out of the way of danger, not so great if I've got to reply to a difficult email. It also makes us kind of experience the world quite loudly. So our senses become really heightened. So everything feels a little bit more in our face. And the threat response is incredibly quick and reactive. But the problem with it is it isn't very accurate. So it's a little bit clumsy because it's so quick and reactive. Now, once that threat response has been activated within our brain, we start to experience a physiological response as well. So our heart rate increases, our breathing rate changes, we might sweat a bit more, we might hold our breath, we might gasp with our breath. And ultimately, once the brain believes that we are in a life or death situation, it triggers what's known as an amygdala response. And the amygdala is a little tiny almond-shaped part of their brain that sits within the limbic region. For those of you who know about Professor Steve Peters' work, it's within our inner chimp. And the amygdala response, most of us know well as the fight or flight response. It's, I've detected a threat, now how do I deal with it? And we think of it as the fight or flight response, but there's actually 5 ways in which we can deal with a threat, which I'll cover in a moment. We then go into our behavior. So how am I going to deal with this now that my brain has activated the amygdala? And ultimately, all of that behavior is focused purely on my survival. Now, if I am running for my life, that is really, really good. And I can guarantee this whole process has taken place in your life at some point and it has kept you alive. However, if I'm not running for my life and I'm dealing with more emotional threats, then that behavioral response is still very survival focused. And that can be really clumsy. It can actually make things worse, not better. So that's when we perhaps lose our temper at someone. That's perhaps when we send an email back to someone and then we later regret it when we calm down because it's just focused on me surviving right now. So if you are currently leading under a high level of stress, it is almost like you are going through your day-to-day work life with an internal fire alarm constantly being hit. Now, if there was a fire alarm going off in your head over and over again, it would be very hard to do your job really well. And that's what happens when we stay in this stress state. Now, I want to expand a little bit on this amygdala response. The amygdala response is really interesting because I said that many of us think it's fight or flight, but actually there's 5 Fs that we can use to deal with any threat that we are encountering. And these can be split into hyperarousal. So that's when the stress we're experiencing causes us to have an excess in energy. So that looks like fighting. So we confront, we push back, we become argumentative. It looks like running away. I've got so much energy, I just want to run and get away from here. That's the flight response. Or it looks like fawning, which is where we appease, we over-agree, we people please, we become really focused on the other person's needs more than ourselves. Or we can go into hypoarousal. And hypoarousal is where stress causes essentially all the energy to be drained out of us. We have too little energy to take action. So that looks like the freeze response. The rabbit in the headlights is when we're stuck, when we're indecisive, when we're procrastinating. Or the faint response, which is a more exaggerated version of that. We call it the faint or the flop response. And that's when we can completely shut down and disengage. Some of you mentioned that, when stress is so high that you just become so overwhelmed, you can't even think straight, really. That's the faint and flop response. It's more severe than the freeze response. So when we start to experience high levels of stress as a leader, then our brain is still doing this stuff. And what that can look like is any of these behaviors. Now, I want you to have a little think about what stress response would you default to under pressure at work. So are you someone who fights, you push back, you get angry, you snap at people? Are you someone that flights, you avoid, you run away, you retreat, you phone in sick, you suddenly remember you've got an emergency you've got to deal with? Are you a fawner, someone who people pleases, over agrees, kind of retreats, rolls over, doesn't fight back? Do you freeze? Do you procrastinate, delay, wait? Or do you faint and flop? Do you disengage? Do you play dead? Do you just go into complete shutdown? Now, what's really interesting, and this popped up when some of you said, oh, it depends on the situation. It depends on who I'm dealing with. It depends on where I am. The interesting thing about the stress response is that many of us have a preferred way of dealing with stress, but that can fluctuate depending on our environment. So the way I would deal with stress with a client would be very different to the way I would deal with stress with Tom. And I want you to just reflect on that. Think about if a manager, a client, a stakeholder has really got you wound up, how you would deal with that. And then I want you to think about if a loved one has got you really wound up and how you would deal with that. And I think many of you will start to see that there's a difference in our behaviors. Let me know in the chat box if you can kind of recognize that difference. Because what we start to see is that we respond to stress differently depending on the consequences we face. So sometimes the most primal version of the stress response is usually reserved for the people closest to us, which feels kind of like they shouldn't get the worst version of us, right? But actually it's because we feel safer with them, then they get that worst version. If I lost my temper with Tom compared to losing my temper with a client, you will see that there's a consequence to that. Yeah, you can see the difference. Absolutely. So my brain knows that there's a different way that I need to handle it. So many of us, when we're getting stressed at work, may also be fighting our natural instinct to deal with that stress. And you don't have to share this at all, but I bet there are countless people here that have had a boss, a client, a customer, a stakeholder that you would love to do the fight response with and tell them exactly what you think. But instead, you've people pleased and you've kind of said, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, that kind of thing, and felt really exhausted by the end of it because you are not only activating that stress response, but you're actually activating a stress response that doesn't feel like it's the appropriate response at the time. Yeah, fawn and freeze, work, fight. Yeah, I completely get that. So that's where lots of us would be, Lucy. Fawn and freeze, work, fight at home. Yep, Catherine's exactly the same, Lucy. So when we're dealing with threats at work, and I say threats kind of like that because threats could just be, I've got 50 emails to answer. We know rationally that this isn't a threatening situation. But if I'm activating stress, my brain will see it as a threat. When we're dealing with that, what happens is we start to change how we operate in our brain. So stress isn't just this kind of external physiological, oh, I get exhausted, my heart races, I feel tired. Stress doesn't just change your physiology, it changes your psychology. It changes how you think. Now, as soon as we've activated that stress response, we go into more tunnel vision thinking. So we disengage our prefrontal cortex. And so we stop being very good at critical thinking. So we're not good at seeing the bigger picture. And we go into very narrow thinking, like I've only got to deal with this threat. We start to make decisions in a very black or white binary way. So we don't necessarily see the full consequences of our decision other than, does this alleviate the stress right now? We make quicker decisions. We become super reactive. And this is really interesting for everyone in this room, the more stressed we have, the more we struggle with empathy. So our ability to empathize with others becomes really diminished the more stressed we are. And again, you don't have to share, but I want you to think about a time where you're just dealing with so much stress and then someone comes to you with something and you just think, I haven't got the energy for that. I can't deal with that. So we can now start to piece together, no problem at all, Sheila, it's all recorded. So we can start to piece together that when we come under stress as a leader, we are likely to activate that amygdala response, which changes our behaviors, changes the way we think, the way we process. That might not be our natural response because we are containing it due to consequences at work. And as a result, we start to experience essentially different cognition. We think differently about situations. So I want you to think about the last time you were awake at 3 a.m. trying to solve a big problem. Now, when we're awake at 3 a.m., we are much more in our limbic region. So we're not really thinking very rationally. And what you will notice is that when you're trying to solve something at 3 a.m., you go round in circles, you confuse yourself, you overwhelm yourself. And then the next day you remember that you were up thinking of that problem and you think, that wasn't even really a problem. I can solve that really easily. That's because your rational brain has come back online. So that's a good indication of how stress prevents us from having clarity, how it makes us think differently. Jolanta, if it's okay with you, I'm going to answer that at the end. But Tom, please don't let me forget to answer that. But I will come back to it, I promise. So I want to share with you tools. Before you react, before you start to have that difficult conversation, before you make a tough decision, I want to share with you really simple tools that will enable you to make sure that you make no decision from a place of dysregulation. In last month's workshop, I shared it was something like regulated leaders create regulated teams. This is still that idea that if I am regulated, and when I talk about regulated, I'm talking about the nervous system. So I'm not in that stress state. I am calm. I am responsive, not reactive. I'm making sort of executive decisions. I am engaged in critical thinking. When I'm regulated, then the rest of my team can be regulated. When I'm dysregulated, I'm stressed, I'm kicking in those 5 Fs, I'm anxious, I'm worried, I'm all over the place, then my team will naturally start to dysregulate as well. So first thing I want you to take away from this before we go into these tools is you make no decision from dysregulation. And this goes for your professional and your personal life. If I'm dysregulated, if I'm stressed, if I'm all over the place, unless I am truly running for my life, I will not make a decision. I need to calm myself down before I make a decision. So 3 tools that I want to share with you to help you do that. The first is based on advice that I would say I probably give, whether it's in one-to-ones or whether it's on training courses, I probably give it daily. And it's change your physiology to change your psychology. So often when we're dealing with a lot in our head, when we're stressed, when we're anxious, when we're worried, we try and think ourselves out of a cognitive problem. And what that does is it puts more load on our brain and it actually makes everything feel a bit harder. So instead of trying to think ourselves calm, the easiest way to start to bring calm in when my brain is scattered and all over the place is to get my body to be calm. So we've talked before in previous sessions, I've given tools on grounding, breathing techniques, all sorts of ways. But essentially what we need to do is to get into the body, not just in the brain. So you can do that by slowing down your breathing and just taking deliberate deep breaths. At least 60 seconds will help to regulate. You can do that by going for a calm walk. So not on your phone, just a walk where you're just taking in the nature around you. You can do that by doing a really simple mindfulness exercise where you use your senses to take in details. But when I change my physiology, my brain will catch up with it. So it could be something as simple as I've been hunched over, sat like a prawn at my desk, my jaw's getting tight, my shoulders are tight, and I decide to just stand up and loosen my body out. That is enough to send a signal to my brain that maybe I'm not in a life or death situation. So change your physiology to change your psychology. The next is a tool that we call practice in the pause. And this really moves us from being reactive to responsive. So practice in the pause is recognizing how important it is to give myself some time to not respond from the stress part of my brain, essentially that inner chimp that Professor Steve Peters talks about. Now, Professor Steve Peters says that once our inner chimp is activated, it takes around 20 minutes for our rational brain to come back online. Now, 20 minutes is not always feasible when we're dealing with something stressful. If it is, then I recommend you give yourself a 20-minute step away. So if you receive a difficult email, the chances are you don't need to respond to it there and then. Give yourself 20 minutes before you respond, and your human brain will have come back online and you can be more responsive rather than reactive. If you can't do that, if you're dealing with a difficult conversation and you can't make an excuse, pop to the bathroom, I'm just going to get some more information. If you can't do that, then practice in the pause is just purely not speaking as much as your brain wants you to. So we're not going into hypo-arousal, we're not shutting down, but we are making sure that we leave gaps, making sure that we're reflective, making sure that we are fully understanding what the other person's trying to communicate. So I'm going to pause before I respond to them. And then the third tool is to ask yourself what actually matters right now. Now, those of you who said you can get caught in overthinking and overwhelm, you will find, and I know because I can do this too, you will find that once you start to get stressed, that little part of your brain likes to then go, oh, and there's that thing, and there's that thing, oh, and another thing, and another thing. And the next thing you know, you just feel like you're drowning in things that you feel you have to do. Now, the reality is you don't have to do all of those things. It's like our brain is just adding more and more and more to it. So ask yourself in this moment, what actually matters right now? It might matter that I get a response back to this person as soon as possible. That might be where my energy has to go. But it can equally matter that what actually matters right now is that I look after myself and I regulate myself. When we focus on this question, and it's a great question to ask team members that are kind of getting a bit bogged down in stuff, what actually matters right now? It's not what's a priority, it's not what do I have to do, it's right now in this moment, what actually matters. And that just helps us start to step into this self-regulation. Once we go into self-regulation, we can start to become a regulated leader and therefore feed off and create regulated teams. Now, one of the ways that this works so powerfully is because we as human beings experience something called emotional contagion. So human beings pick up on the emotions of other human beings to know what to feel. So you've had a situation where perhaps you've walked into a room and you feel that it's stressy. You just instantly feel that stress vibe from everyone else. And you might have felt fine, but as soon as you walk into that room, you start to react to it. Equally, we can walk into a room and everyone's in a great mood and they're happy, and eventually we start to pick up on that as well. What is interesting with emotional contagion is we can pick up on any emotion, but stress is slightly different because picking up on stress is actually an evolutionary advantage. So if we think back to primitive times, if we were all sat around the campfire and then half of the tribe started to get really stressed and worried, and the other half of the tribe couldn't work out why, it makes sense that they may have seen or sensed something that I haven't picked up on. So I'd better get stressed and worried as well. So stress is especially contagious because there's a survival element to it. So if you're a leader that is leading from stress, you will be kind of inadvertently pushing that stress onto your team. And again, reflect back on managers you've had in the past. I can think of one manager in particular that was just constantly stressed and rushing. And the minute he walked in the room, the rest of us would kind of, oh, you'd instantly feel it and feel like you had to do everything really quickly as well. So a calm and clear leader creates calm and clear teams because you're pushing that emotional contagion in a positive way. We've already talked a little bit about how if we're regulated, if we're calm and we're clear, our decision making is better. And predominantly that is because when we're regulated, we have the prefrontal cortex online, which is the part of our brain that is responsible for critical thinking and executive decision making. When I am stressed, I make decisions based on survival, not on the kind of good of the whole team. And something that we teach on an awful lot, particularly at the moment, is ultimately a calm and clear leader starts to create psychological safety. When we feel psychologically safe within an organization, we are safe to ask questions, we are safe to make mistakes, we are safe to say we don't know what we're doing, we are safe to say I need help. If my leader is stressed and pushing their emotion down, I will not feel safe to do those things. So to create psychological safety, what we really need is regulated leaders. So I'm going to share with you a really simple action plan that you can just kind of have on your desk if you know right now I'm dealing with a lot of stress. So the first thing is to really focus on what's my biggest stress trigger right now. And you may well have lots of things going on at work and at home, but I want you to think more about the trigger of it. Is it that my inbox is overwhelming? Is it that this one person just is constantly on my case? Is it that I'm really worried about that thing happening at home and it's just filtering into everything else? See you, Steph. Um, so think about what that biggest stress trigger is. Then I want you to pay attention. What is the early warning sign in my body that that's going on? So the early warning sign, well, for me, is that I start to notice I've got a bit of tension in my neck. So I notice I'm doing this a bit more. I'm rolling my shoulders a bit more. For some people, it could be that they notice that their breathing changes. So they do this gasping for breath, this sighing, this yawning. That's a sign that we're trying to regulate ourselves when we sigh and yawn a lot. For other people, it could be that you start to get a bit of a headache or that you're sleeping but not feeling rested. All of these are early warning signs that your stress levels are a bit too high. And then what's the early warning sign in my mind? So is it that I'm short-tempered? Is it that I've got a bit of compassion fatigue? I just can't care for everyone else because I feel a bit overwhelmed. Is it that I feel a bit scattered? I'm showing up at work, but I'm not got the clarity I normally have. And then I want you to pick one tool that helps you reset. And it can be a tool from what we've covered. It can be a tool that you already do. It can be a tool you've picked up from one of our previous lunch and learns, a tool that helps you reset. So my really simple tool that I use for me is going for a walk. Even if it's only a 5-minute walk, that walk always helps me start to reset and get perspective. So that gives you this kind of go-to to recognize your warning signs a bit earlier and to make sure that you have this go-to tool that will help reduce it. So in summary, stress impacts our capacity to lead. It should not be underestimated. If you are working in an organization right now where you know the leadership team are super stressed, that will be having a negative impact on the rest of the workforce and is definitely something that needs addressing. Being in a people-centric role creates a lot of stress. You've got the workload stress and the caring for people stress. We need to be a little bit selfish. If we regulate ourselves first, we really have that capacity to spread positive emotional contagion. Reframe your thinking a little bit, be aware of kind of what's going on for you. What are my early warning signs? And create that calm, clarity action plan. I will absolutely answer questions. I'll let Tom wrap up before I come to the questions. I know that I've got to go back to Jolanta's and there's one in the Q&A as well. So Tom, I will hand over to you for a moment.
I've answered the one in the Q&A. It's all about the replay afterwards, so you don't need to get to that. But yes, I've got a note of Jolanta's question. So the video and resources will all be emailed after the session, but you'll also be able to access them through our website, beamtraining.co.uk. That link for all of that will be in the email that I'll send to you after this session, so don't worry about that just now. I have put in the chat box links to the next few sessions and an opportunity for you to be able to join our LinkedIn group. So our next session is actually on the 28th of April, is the AI Capacity Conundrum with a specialist guest, Simon Drinkwater from Vanta Advisory. And we'll be talking about how to implement AI from a change people perspective. Really interesting stuff. On the 12th of May, we have vulnerability for people, and it's all about courage and being real. Really, really interesting topic that will be worth coming along to. In June, we have role models for people as well, so that's another great session. If you are in South Wales or the southwest of England, then we have our next in-person session in Cardiff in partnership with HR Network Wales. So this is our People Power series, and it's all about why well-being isn't a tick box exercise. We have a great panel. Leanne is on the panel. I'll be hosting the session. We have a we have a chief of people from a tech company in Bristol. We've also got it is a great panel. I can't think of everybody that's on it so far, but we'll send out information for that. And there's a link to get tickets for that. That is a paid ticket. So everything else we do is totally free, but that is in person. So we have some costs. So there is a price for that ticket, but you are welcome to come along as well. If you need any further help or support from us at Beam, our details are on the slide now, but you can also visit beamtraining.co.uk, contact us that way, or alternatively, you can book a call with us using the link in the chat as well. So there was a question. I'm going to keep recording whilst Leanne answers the question from Jolanta, which is, what tools or techniques could help choose the response to stress rather than defaulting to one of those 5 Fs?
Okay, so it's such a good question, but I couldn't answer it quickly enough to do during the session. So thank you, Jolanta. So if we go back to Professor Steve Peters' chimp paradox, because it's just such a lovely metaphor, what he describes is that your chimp brain, i.e. the stress response, is 5 times stronger than your human brain, i.e. the prefrontal cortex. So just by thinking alone, I cannot overpower that stress response because it's very primitive. It's very quick. It takes a long time actually for our human brain to come online and be able to react to something. However, the third part of the brain that Peters identifies is called the parietal, which is like our inner computer. And the inner computer is 20 times stronger than the human. So what we can do is, if we create really healthy stress coping mechanisms, so we pause before we respond, we do some breathing exercises, we get into our physiology, not our psychology. We have these kind of coping mechanisms to hand. Essentially, the more you use them, the more they become programmed within the computer. So if we think of algorithmic language, my brain absolutely now is programmed. This was not my default. My brain is programmed to, if something upsets me, then I pause and do some breathing. If I've had a stressful client, then I will take a 5-minute walk. If I feel upset, then I will walk away before I respond. All of a sudden, the more you use this kind of algorithmic if-then behaviors, what happens is when we go into a stressful state, instead of perhaps flight response kicking in and I just want to run away straight away, what actually kicks in before that flight response is the pausing and breathing, the taking some space. So it starts to become more powerful than the actual amygdala response. Now, the reason that I wanted to kind of give a bit of time is because when we talk about neuroscience, we have to simplify how we talk about it. And even this is a simplification. The amygdala response is essentially there to make us survive life-threatening situations. So I can't, and I wouldn't want to program my brain to never get stressed, because that means I'd cross the road without feeling a hint of stress, that I would walk down a dark alley late at night without feeling a hint of stress. So the inner chimp is always there, almost as your security guard, right? So every now and then, it doesn't matter how much you live and breathe this stuff, and I'm kind of living proof. Every now and then I will still have a chimp moment. I will still have times where I go into those stress responses. Now, what you do get better at, the more you programmed your computer, is you get better at bringing yourself out of it when you notice it. So, oh, I'm going into people pleasing. This must be stressful. Let me pause for a minute. Or I'm starting to get angry. I'm going into the fight response. Maybe I need to cool down for a bit. So it becomes easier to manage, but you will never, ever, ever have full control of your inner chimp. That doesn't mean you don't have responsibility. We all have responsibility, but you don't have full control over it. Anyway, I hope that answers it, Jolanta. Well, so another element to that, Jolanta says, I just thought I was becoming calmer with age. The problem, or perhaps the blessing, is as females get older, we decline in estrogen. And I'm trying to, well, I can't term this in a polite way because this is how experts describe it. So this isn't my language necessarily, but the more our estrogen declines, the more we enter our don't give a shit years. So estrogen makes us care about everything. And so we feel everything and we care and we get worried and upset about upsetting people. As estrogen decreases, then we care a bit less about those things, which can look like us being a little bit calmer at times, or maybe not reacting at things that we would have reacted to a few years before. So that might be part of it as well. Are there any other questions?
What I'm going to do just now is I'm going to stop the recording and we'll hang around if any of those other questions come in.
Absolutely. Oh, no, it's not.